Hey, we're back on the program this Monday, April the 9th edition of the HX Live show here on the one and only Ron Paul Radio Network. And we are talking today to Fox 19 primetime anchor Ben Swann, host, writer, producer of The Reality Check. And everybody who's listening right now knows exactly what that is. It was one of the, really, I think it was one of the defining moments of this campaign cycle, to be honest with you, because we were facing such a huge blackout at that point, Ben, that we were, people were really discouraged and people were really down, and they were thinking, what in the world is going on? And then you came out with The Reality Check and gave us some fair coverage, and we were like, finally, it was like like finding the oasis in the middle of the desert. So thanks to you on behalf of the Revolution.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and that's a very humbling thing for you to say. Because really our goal here was never to promote anyone or push anyone forward, just to be fair. And what we have found in doing this is that there's just the lack of fairness, the lack of transparency, the lack of honesty within media today. It's pretty staggering.
It is. Staggering is almost putting it lightly. It's like
it's true.
It's almost like one of America's worst nightmares come true, because the media is supposed to be the full branch of government here. We're supposed to be depending on you guys to tell us what's going on, even when it's uncomfortable or even when it's things we don't agree with, so that we can be an informed citizenry and make our own decisions. But of course, if you take a look at some of the ownership hierarchies, you start to get a picture of maybe why they don't like to cover the military-industrial complex and any that kind of threatens their bottom line. You know what I mean?
Well, that's right. That's right. And we were saying right before the break, that with Fox, it's like they don't want anybody who is not going to continue to push for these foreign interventions. And so, Paul is not their guy. But on the other side of it, you have these left-leaning news organizations, and they don't like him because he's the biggest threat to President Obama. The bottom line is, if they're going to be honest in terms of coverage, you would know that Congressman Paul is the only candidate who actually takes away from the president's base. None of these other candidates do. And so in a general head-to-head election, who does Paul pick up? He picks up anti-war Democrats who are disillusioned right now with the president, who has continued to expand wars and get into these issues. And secondly, he takes away the youth vote, which was so instrumental in getting President Obama into office in 2008, and he takes that vote and cuts deeply into it. He's the only candidate who does that, and that's why the liberal media won't talk about him, because a lot of his positions would appeal to Democrats. He does not fit into the left-right paradigm that's already been created by media. He screws up their system, and as a result, they won't talk about him.
Right, and that's just such an important point to make. Speaking of the liberal media here, NBC recently got caught manipulating the Zimmerman 911 or 911 call to make it appear, kind of racist. In your experience in this industry, is that kind of media manipulation commonplace, or is this sort of a unique occurrence?
Well, I think that's a tough question. I think in the Zimmerman case specifically, I think that's a unique occurrence. I think it was ABC, but maybe you're right. Maybe it was NBC. But either way, whoever it was that got caught doing this, they're editing things and shifting them around. But what happens in the newsroom meetings, in the editorial meetings where they decide what makes a newscast, I think is less about the outward manipulation and more about a groupthink ideology. Within liberal media and conservative media, you get groupthink mentality, where instead of people saying, well, look, this is a legitimate story or this is a legitimate issue that we need to be talking about, instead they'll look at it and overall say, well, we don't want to talk about any of these issues. So, for instance, we did a piece not too long ago on the fiat dollar and how it relates to gas prices. And, at the time, I got a lot of emails from people and even heard from other people in media who were saying, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about this stuff? Because, again, it doesn't fit with the left-right paradigm. But it is a manipulation because the facts are there. Look at the facts and look at the devaluation of the dollar versus other commodities, gold, oil, and see how we're paying more per gallon, and it's not a supply and demand issue. And yet media doesn't want to talk about those issues. So there's definitely a certain amount of manipulation that takes place within the context of editorial meetings because they're deciding certain issues will not be covered and certain things will be. But it's maybe not quite as obvious as editing down tapes, but I think it's still just as big of a problem.
Right. Well, this specifically, this Zimmerman 911 call, I get a lot of people, who think that, of course, there's certain particular agenda-driven reasons behind this, and I have to remind them that one of the major agenda-driven reasons behind this is ratings, and I think a story about racism probably sells more copies, so to speak, don't you think?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's about ratings, and it's also about changing the discussion. See, I think most of what, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I think most of what, especially national media does, is they're looking for, and hear me out here, but they're looking for kind of the dumbest story possible. It's the simplest story possible, the story that requires them to think the least and to do the least. And so, for instance,
to the common denominator.
That's right. In the Zimmerman case, all it is it's basically they're talking about issues that really have nothing to do with the actual case itself. No one's actually talking about the case. They're talking about issues of black and white crime and black on black crime. They're talking about hate crimes. They're talking about all these other issues that have nothing. They're talking about hoodies and people walking around in hoodies and looking for justice for Trayvon. Let the case play out. Media should be monitoring the case, not taking part in this circus of just pulling any crazy idea they possibly can that's related to, race and those issues. And instead, what I think is happening is it allows for a distraction. That story is such a distraction to what's going on in this country. And so they'll talk about those issues because, again, as you said, it means ratings. In their mind, it means ratings. But I don't think it honestly translates into that. I don't think most people honestly care about that.
Oh, no,
it's an interesting case.
Well, yeah, but if you look at, if for example, if you look at, this is a report that I just read recently. If you look at the ratings that CNN has been getting, for example, their viewership has been cut in half over the last year.
In 1 year.
That's a huge loss.
It is. When you're talking about a 50% decline in viewership from first quarter of 2011 to first quarter of 2012, that is stunning. And it's because it's exactly that kind of thing. I mean, yes, the Trayvon Martin case may be an interesting case to some people, but it's an issue of case overload. I mean, how many times is this thing being played out in Chicago? How many times, right here in Cincinnati, we've got it playing out over and over and over where young people are being shot. And that doesn't mean we ignore the story. That doesn't mean we don't cover the story. It's an important story. But what they're doing is they're taking one particular example and they're just trying to milk it for everything it's worth. Meanwhile, they're not talking about the major issues that are affecting the lives of so many people around the country. And maybe that's why the Trayvon story is a safe one, is because it doesn't require people to actually do anything. Look, there are a lot of people who are doing marches around the country saying justice for Trayvon, but what are they actually doing to change things in the neighborhoods and the cities where they live? Because marching around with a hoodie on is not changing anything. You know what I'm saying?
It's very true, and it's just sad that that the media, that big media, would go for the safe story instead of the relevant story. Speaking of safety, that's not something you seem to worry about very much in what you do. You all cover these topics that other people in the media won't touch. Have you had any kind of pushback?
A little bit of pushback, and I hear from some people every now and then, who are really trying to, I guess, kind of stir the pot and say you need to go back to doing what you should be doing, report local news and stay away from this stuff. You don't need to be talking about this stuff. But yeah, I mean, the way I see it is I'm not worried about it. I'm not fearful of anything. We're going to put the truth out there and let the chips fall where they may.
That's awesome. Hey, we're coming up to the end of our time. Thanks so much for the phone call, Ben, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. There he goes. We'll be right back after the break to wrap up the program. HX Live, RonPaulRadio.com.
We were brought up loving our country. That in the United States of America, we were free. And that's an attitude that we've tried to instill in our children. I met my wife in the Air Force. I was a combat pilot in Vietnam. I served in Desert Storm as a commander. When I graduated from the academy, I took the oath of office, and as a commander, I administered that oath to many people. Now I wonder about the understanding people have of our Constitution, and